Hola amigos. So last video, if you watched, we talked about the regular endings and regular conjugations in the preterite. We're going to add on to some of that with just AR verbs. We're going to talk about some specific AR verbs, but still, these verbs are still going to use these endings. A, hasta, o. Notice the accent mark on the E, the accent mark here on the O. Amos, astes. We've got the ASTE, just like we do in the two form, plus the letters IS. That's going to be something we see over and over again. The vosotros form is formed just with the two, and add those two letters IS to make the vosotros. No accent mark here. And then Aaron. So AR endings, these are the endings we use. We're going to talk about some irregularity that happens with a spell change, but these endings will still keep. We still are going to use these verbs, or I'm sorry, these endings for these verbs. So we're going to start off with verbs that end in GAR. Now, notice this is a GAR ending. When you see that three-letter combination, they still end in AR. So these are still AR verbs, and they're still going to use these endings right here. So, but what we're going to do here is whenever we have this combination, that GAR ending, GAR, like the verb pagar, we have to spell that differently to keep that G sound intact. And it only is going to happen right here in the yo form. As you can see, P-A-G is our stem, and then E with an accent is our ending. But we throw this U in there in the middle because without that U, the G-E combination is pronounced like an H sound. So it should be like paje, but it's pagar. We want to keep that G sound intact. So in order to do that, to maintain that pronunciation, that we have to change the spelling here to P-A-G-U, and then still E with an accent. Still using E with an accent because that's what we use with AR verbs in the yo form. If we go back and look at the endings, there it is, right there. E with the accent mark, E con acento. We go down here, we can see it in practice. We see we got pagué, still the exact same ending. We just added the U here just to keep the sound because Spanish is very consistent with the way each syllable should be pronounced and spelled. We go to the two form. Now we can see there's no U here anymore. P-A-G is the stem, A-S-T-E is the ending. That's what you would expect. That's what it is. It's completely regular. So pagaste, pagó, pagamos, pagastes, pagaron. These are all regular conjugations after the yo form. Yo form, we have a spell change, but beyond that, everything is as expected. We conjugate it accordingly, completely regular to él, usted, nosotros, vosotros, ellos, ellas, ustedes. These are conjugated like you'd expect, but yo form has a spell change. And that is going to be the what we're going to see in the rest of these as well. We're also going to have car and sar endings. When we get to this car verb here, buscar is our example. We can see we have a spell change in the yo form only. Hopefully you recognize that. We've got a Q-U here. Should be the stem. The stem should be B-U-S-C minus the AR. Again, still an AR verb. But when it's spelled C-A-R, then we have to have a spell change and only here in the yo form. So you should have recognized that this doesn't have a C here, and instead it has a Q-U in there. Still E with an accent, because that's what we use within the preterite yo. Busque, again, we want to have the syllable que, because it's buscar. We got that k sound in there. We got to keep that sound. If we put CE, that would be pronounced differently. So we spell it K, and you're probably familiar with that syllable, K, Q-U-E. That's the way it's always spelled, whether it's in the word queso or it's the question K. It's always spelled Q-U-E to make K. So yo form, busque, B-U-S-Q-U-E. So we are going to essentially replace the C with Q-U and add our normal ending that we use for the yo form of AR verbs, which is E with an accent. Let me get busque, buscaste now. Notice there's no spell change. B-U-S-C is our stem, which is exactly what you'd expect. And then aste is the ending, which is what we should use for the two form in the preterite. Buscó, o con acento, buscamos, buscastes, still the two form plus is to make the vosotros. Buscaste, just like we have right here, plus is, buscastes, and buscaron. So besides the yo form, everything else is regular. Yo form, C to QU. And our final ending, we were going to work with the ZAR here. The ZAR, our example is going to be empezar. Now, empezar, we have the conjugation out here. It's an AR verb still, so we're still going to use our a, aste, o, amos, astes, aron endings. But this one is more about consistency with not necessarily the pronunciation, but whenever we put the combination of, we don't use the combination ZE in Spanish. So when we go to the yo form here, we should have EMPEZ, but then we would have an E after the Z, and we don't do that in Spanish because we already have a perfectly good CE combination that makes that same sound. So there's no need to, we don't want to keep the Z here because then it would complicate things and we'd have two different ways of spelling and spelling the same pronunciation of a syllable. So to keep it consistent, the Z becomes a C. So it's a straight up Z to C ending, our change. And then we add our normal endings, a, aste, o, amos, astes, and aron. But on the yo form, we are going to have this change, Z to C. Empecé with the CE ending. Of course, accent mark on the E because that is an AR verb. That's what we do for AR verbs. It has nothing to do with the spell change. The accent mark has nothing to do with the spell change. It is all because it's an AR verb. Empezaste with a Z, empezó with a Z. Everything else has a Z. Everything is regular except the yo form has that spell change. So what we just did today, we just went over gar, car, and sar. And these verbs, whenever we have a gar, car, sar verb, we will spell change in the yo form only. There's another one out there too with guar, G-U-A-R ending. We won't worry about that here, but if you see gar, car, sar at the end of your verb, treat it as a regular AR verb, but in the yo form, do a little pay a little extra attention to it because you are going to have to change the spelling in the yo form only. G is going to be G-U, the C is going to be Q-U, and the Z is going to be C in the stem. But we still, all of them end with the E with an accent because that's an AR verb. And that's what you're supposed to do for AR verbs and that ending. And then everything else, the other 5 conjugations here are all regular. Okay. Bueno, hasta la próxima.